Heidi, whenever you are ready to go, we're ready to start on the backside.
I think Gwen's gonna run the meeting.
Oh, she's okay.
Right?
Okay, Gwen, would you like me to make you the co-host?
Yes, please.
All
That
right.
would be great. Thanks.
No problem.
We finally got the committee renamed, so.
Yeah, Lisa, so budget and finance will be under committee of the whole, which is my committee. So
Oh, well,
we're back together. It's
there you
great.
go. That works. It was nice, Heidi, for a couple weeks.
So I will call the Budget and Finance Committee to order for August 6th, 2022. We are still meeting virtually, so we have posted the options to join this meeting. You can go to our agendas page on the city website and find this meeting and click on the link to join to provide public comment. You can always provide us with voicemail if you want to call us and leave us a message. The number is 406-552-6012, and you can email us. The email address is council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And Lisa, if you would take roll call, that would be great.
All right. Stacy Anderson.
Present.
Mirta Becerra.
Present.
Daniel Carlino.
Present.
John Contos.
Here.
Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Kristen Jordan.
Present.
Mike Nugent.
Here.
Jennifer Savage.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
Present.
And Heidi West.
Present.
All right, everyone is in attendance.
Great. We have minutes from March 30th, 2022 to approve. Were there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. And we have, I'm calling for public comment on items not on the agenda, but we have no one in attendance. So there is no public comment. So today we are completing the mid-year budget review presentations. And I've got a list of presenters here. We're basically covering central services today with what that entails. And my understanding is that Eric Hallstrom, our central services director, our department head, will go first. So is that correct, Eric? Are you up first?
I think so. Let me take a moment and make sure I can share my screen.
Great.
There we go. Are you able to see this?
Yes, we can.
Yay. Well, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Eric Hallstrom. I'm the city's Chief Operations Officer, and I'm here today along with my colleague, Angela Simonson, the city's Chief Human Resources Officer, to talk a little bit about the interim budget update for some of the city's internal services. This is my first time, I think, before the council in this role, I believe, and I would like to say that I'm excited to be working on these activities with you all. I've had a chance to connect with some of the counselors on the climate action strategic implementation work team, and looking forward to opportunities to continue to get to know members of the council and work together on city priorities. You know, I also guess I should note that since legislative services or the clerk's office is part of the central services constellation, I view you not only as my policymaking stakeholders, but also as direct recipients of the services that we provide to keep meetings running, keep the public engaged, and ensure that you have the information necessary to make the decisions that come before you. Let me just start by talking just a little bit about internal services. These are non-revenue generating, centralized or shared service lines that support multiple divisions or activities for the city. Angela and I are here today to talk about the services provided by central services and human resources departments. You're all aware that the city attorney's office provides legal services to all branches of the city government. And of course, our communications director also provides and coordinates citywide communications activity support. And I'll just put a pin in here. I think later I will try to talk just a little bit about some of the work we're doing in the central services department to drive some of the city's strategic work. And I think that that will be sort of dovetail with some of our communications and engagement work. But moving forward to just talk about the central services department specifically, as the Chief Operations Officer, I'm responsible for the Central Services Department, which provides coordinated management of business tools and information that are the services and systems and technologies that allow the city to function. We do this in close collaboration with our city offices that provide similar internal and shared services, like our colleagues in the Human Resources Department. We also do it in the spirit of partnership with other city departments, city leaders, and the public to provide those services in a way that really targets the end user, the final recipient of city government services. 5 departments, as you can see: legislative services led by the clerk, financial services division led by our finance director, Lee, that you're very familiar with, our IT services division, which is currently led by our interim director, Kate Urquhart. As you may be aware, Carl Horton, our previous director, has retired. Our fleet services division led by our fleet services director, Scott Caldwell, and facility services led by Matt Lawson. And I think this is probably the first time I'm going to talk about, or you will have heard much about, this notion of a strategic projects analysis and reporting, SPAR as an acronym. This is just a place to pull together some of the resources, and by resources I mean people who provide and support some of our cross-departmental citywide strategic initiatives to provide project management and analysis and support for big strategic activities. I think there's going to be some evolution in how the level of service that we can provide, but we know this is something that is needed, and we're trying to provide a kind of a centralized place to locate those resources and supports. Mission of the Central Services Department is pretty straightforward. We help provide exceptional administrative and operational services so the city can achieve its broader strategic goals. I'm excited to be working with a department that's really maturing and hungry for opportunities to accelerate the city's progress towards those strategic goals identified in the strategic plan. I moved here from Minnesota, and our late Senator Paul Wellstone had a saying that's fairly well known: we all do better when we all do better. And I feel like the Central Services Department is one of those places where public servants live this truth. Our success is measured by the ability to improve and enhance the delivery of services to people. Most of the time, we're not the ones delivering those services. We are trying to support our colleagues to meet those expectations of the public and our leadership. And we don't feel good until you all feel good about those services. So we also have a unique perspective on the city's operations. We see a very broad swath of the way that a business moves through the city. And so we have the ability to offer and affect a wide variety of city processes. So we don't just turn strategy into action. We also provide insights that sort of help develop and drive some of the strategic choices that the city is making. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the strategic goals for the city to highlight kind of the organizational excellence priority, because Central Services Department feels particularly connected to that priority area. Organizational excellence is about continuous assessment and improvement. It's about prioritizing limited resources, effective communication and collaboration, affecting, nurturing talented, engaged, and diverse workforce. Angela will talk a little bit more about those efforts. And results management, having the data and the information necessary to make wise decisions and achieve the strategic goals that we've set out. I was attracted to this job. Missoula is a very high functioning organization, but there's a ton of opportunity nonetheless. So my team sees these opportunities. We hear about them from our colleagues. We hear about them from the council and the public, and we're excited to drive work in that area. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the organizational excellence goal. And one of those elements is kind of the evolution or obtaining the right organizational structure for, to effectively meet the expectations that we set for these internal services. And so kind of shaping a department that can really reinforce each other and support our collective work on behalf of our colleagues is a big part of that. I mentioned the emergence of the strategic projects team to kind of further that work. And then, of course, just the changing nature of the way we work is really creating, it's a lot of fluctuation and challenge, but it's also a great opportunity for us to find new ways to work in a way that meet employees where they're at and allow us to explore some new ways to do business in a more effective way. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I don't want to give short shrift to our other strategic goals, because organizational excellence is not the only thing that the Central Services Department is focused on. We're actively involved in supporting a full span of the city's strategic work, from safety, where we're working with the police departments on their long-term service evaluation, space needs assessment. We're involved in climate action, where we're helping to develop that climate decision-making lens and thinking about coordinated plans around electric vehicle uptake and utilization. And we represent central services in a lot of the strategic implementation work teams. And so we share our expertise and knowledge of city business processes and operations to help guide the prioritization of the work that those groups are doing. So now to get to the budget a little bit, we in some ways are a little less interesting than some of our colleague departments, because we're not looking so closely at the balance between our revenue and expenditures. But I think it's important to take a look at the overall allocation of the central services budget across those divisions. You can see an annual operating budget about $7.3 million. We received ARPA funding as well as a pretty hefty CIP budget. That CIP budget is about 2/3, and we can talk about this in a moment, but 2/3 of that is our operational vehicles. And I have sort of an update on whether or not how we're able to use that CIP. As you'll see in our challenges, is probably very similar to what you've heard from other departments. Supply chain and cost is really creating some challenges for our business units. I'll also put in a plug here for ARPA and other resources, federal recovery resources, state recovery resources, to use those for some of these internal city services. For us, a large chunk of that ARPA investment is for IT services. They were to provide technologies and training for safe and secure hybrid and remote working environments, phased deployment of new software and hardware, try to modernize our collaboration and communication. But these are oftentimes costs. The ARPA type funds, the federal funds for that have a fairly broad application, are a way for us to use those resources to pay for things that we are going to have to do anyway to stay either competitive or to continue to provide a service. And this is a way to free up in some ways our more flexible and discretionary funds by using some of these federal grant monies to take the weight off of our general fund need. Obviously, if there's questions about the operating budget, I'll take those at the end as well. So I don't want to go too quickly over this, but I think more in some ways what's interesting about about the budget is sort of where it goes and how we use it. You can see just by looking at this chart, we are about 2/3 of our budget is personnel costs. So we are heavily dependent on, our budget is primarily driven by our employees. But I also broke out our purchase services here a little bit more, with a little bit more detail, because we have a couple big categories here, and I think it's important for you all to see them. The licenses and maintenance section here, about 14% of that purchase service budget is for licenses and hardware service that supports the city's employees and our systems. It's Microsoft Office 365, it's Adobe, it's PaperCut, it's Barracuda, it's the operating systems that run our on-prem servers. So it's just a significant chunk of that non-personnel budget is going into those ongoing technology costs that are just going to continue. This is sort of a feature of the way technology, we pay for technology. We also have professional services in here, things like, I believe, our audit and some of our other costs are picked up there. And then all other purchase services, which I will just note, has, that's repair and maintenance for our facilities program, and maybe it's, electricity and natural gas costs as well. So that makes up about $600,000, I think, of our budget. Here's just a quick reconciliation or projection of where we're at the moment for our divisions. As you can see, this is pretty consistent with the story that you heard from other departments. We are to the good in all of these accounts, but that's largely because of anticipated savings due to salary savings. It's about 6% off of that budgeted number, which isn't, it's not shocking, but it does sort of reflect a consistent story that we're hearing. It takes a little long to hire. It can be challenging to fill all of your vacancies. There's a couple areas where, like for department administration, we went through leadership transition, and so we had some periods of unfilled positions. But overall, you can see sort of largely we're at about 6.8 million in our projected expenditures out of a anticipated budget of a budgeted amount of 7.3 million. So just to kind of tie up some of those common challenges, I think, as I said, this is very similar to other experiences across the city. Supply chain impacts have played some havoc with vehicle purchases, and especially just larger purchases all around. Also, technology equipment and purchases often take more time. I will note that one thing it has exposed is that our business processes sometimes are not nimble enough for us to take advantage of really narrow windows to make a purchase, for instance. So even just a lag time, a normal and typical lag time for a week or two to move a contract choice through the process in previous years is now we're running into situations where the items that we want to bid on are gone by the time that we have all of our ducks in a row. That's, I think, a reality that we're going to face going forward for the future. And you'll see when I get to some of the next couple slides that that's an item that we're going to focus on, how we can look for opportunities to avoid those hiccups in our process. Staffing and capacity are issues. As we're tight on staffing, it limits our ability to provide a service level that we would like. I think there are opportunities in terms of providing additional service capacity and using third parties sometimes, but even there, it's been challenging to find contractors. And so that staffing and capacity is not just an in the building employee issue, it's an issue that's affecting all of the supply chain for contracting work as well. And then I guess this last one where we talk about aligning and improving business operations, I'll just say that, I I don't know that it's a challenge. I mean, I've talked about it as a challenge, but it's really an opportunity to improve our business processes. And so, the real question for us is usually, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? Which processes do we want to focus on? We only have a certain amount of capacity to manage change within an organization. And so we want to pick the improvements that are going to make a real significant impact on either efficiency or budget. So that's, I think, a great, like I said, it's an opportunity going forward. For instance, and one good example of that is both, and I'll mention this in a moment, both finance and our finance division and the HR department are looking at upgrades to their core systems. And it's really important that those work together, because payroll is an interdependency that sort of sits between HR and finance, and those systems have to work well together. And we're looking for some synergies as we both move forward with system selection processes to squeeze the most out of that process to by collaborating together. I'm not going to go in great detail over all of these, but I did just want to flag a few of the highlights from our divisions. In particular, you're probably familiar with the remodel of the third courtroom that is moving forward at the moment under budget, and I think even ahead of time. We know we'll have some change items to come as we get close to the end, but we're feeling good about where we're at with our contingency. We also, as you know, added a FTE to provide some additional support around pandemic disinfection. I think we'll have a conversation about that in FY23 about how to continue some of that role. I think we're at the outset, we thought this might be more focused on janitorial and disinfecting focused, but as we're changing the way we work, it is necessitating a lot of actual physical adjustments to our workspaces. And I think that this role has really stepped in to help provide some additional maintenance support for the facilities team beyond that initial assumptions about, very focused on disinfection. For fleet services, I mentioned this before, business process review, just to figure out how we can take advantage of some of these very, very narrow windows in the procurement process, and just evaluating procurement process overall. We spend a lot of money in this area, and it's important that we are able to strike when the iron's hot these days. And so that's just an area where we need to concentrate on improving some internal processes. The overall service delivery for fleet, it just continues. They provide great customer service even when they have supply chain impacts and business process impacts. But they're at some point going to hit their max point with staffing. I think our vehicle numbers have probably our staffing numbers have not kept up with our vehicle numbers. And so, I think as we introduce electric and hybrid vehicles into the fleet, we'll just have a continued need to evaluate the appropriate capacity and service level for that team. I'll just note on the ahead, I think part of what's coming out of the climate action strategic work is the need to create a citywide plan around EV infrastructure and EV acquisition. And so Scott and the fleet department are very involved in that, and looking forward to creating kind of a blueprint for for us to follow as we make decisions around vehicles, both for within all of our departments, as I say, parks and public works, but throughout the city. For financial services, a big project underway is the cost allocations plan or study, which looks at how our various component parts of the city use in our central internal services. And then we can then ensure that we are getting as close to an accurate picture and charge for those component parts as it relates to overhead. So this will help us get to a more right-sized charge for each of our departments for the services that they consume from internal services. And it's just something to keep in mind that may be the reason you see some changes in the FY23 budgets as folks come forward with baseline adjustments. You might see that that's been informed by updated data out of that cost allocation plan. I think it's been about 8 or so years since that has been updated. I believe it's before the water utility was brought into the city. So it'll be a really good opportunity for us to get a better sense of how we're consuming those internal services. And then, as I mentioned before, financial software system we're looking to upgrade. And then of course, FY23 budget, which you'll hear about from Lee here in a moment. Legislative services and the clerk's office, you're obviously very intimately familiar with Marty's team and the work that they do. They launched that eScribe module for board manager to replace their outdated software. And I think they're using that to track about 140 city board and commission members, includes profiles for boards and tracks members' roles and terms. During the pandemic, the city was also sort of switched to the digital signatures for documents, as you're also very aware. And I think the notarize is sort of the next step where we are going to be able to obtain certification and provide a fully digital workflow for city documents requiring notarization. And I think that that will continue the efficiencies that we've seen in the transition to digital in that area. I should also just say, the office restructured to support special projects. The clerk's office has just been instrumental in supporting the Office 365 rollout. As you know, they've been working very hard on managing a effective digital meeting program that creates really engaging and meaningful meetings, whether you're in person or not. And we have a lot to do in terms of records management and data management. So clerk's office is very focused. They've restructured in mid-21 to meet some of those changing needs, and they're going to continue to be a critical resource for our work around information governance and record management going forward. And finally, information technology, which includes our GIS, Geographic Information Systems teams. Again, you're very aware with many of the technology implementations that have taken place throughout the pandemic. But the ones I really want to call out are Office 365, where we've completed that phase 1 to get our teams, get Teams Voice rolled out, move email to the cloud, and do a few of the initial first steps. And we are now moving into the phase 2, where we develop governance and start rolling out tools that will allow us to be more to integrate some of the data and the information that we have into our regular processes. We're going to be focused on virtual hybrid work models for a while and trying to get that right. It's going to affect the way we do equipment refresh. And I think we'll form a conversation that we'll have coming into FY23 budget development, and particularly talk about how we can deploy some of these resources such as ARPA to support this continued transition for the city. One thing I'll just put another pin in, and this is a place we'll have a conversation in the future, but cybersecurity is a place where the president has reached out to municipal leaders and private sector leaders to encourage the adoption and deployment of cybersecurity measures, both sort of disaster recovery measures and prophylactic measures. But in the president's letter, he really emphasized the availability of federal infrastructure funding to support that work, and really highlighted the conflict in Ukraine as making it all sort of just reminding us how significant the risks around a cybersecurity can be in a conflict environment. As it relates to GIS, first item on here is Missoulamaps.com. I'm not sure that we've had Lee or anybody in front of council yet to talk about this, but this is a one-stop shop for public maps for the city, and we will get a chance to do an informational briefing as soon as we can. Features more than 12 interactive web maps, such as council ward maps, utility maps, and access to other GIS data for update city limits, etc. And that content is always in development, but it's a very cool tool, and we're excited about the opportunity to use it. We've been doing some system upgrades around the enterprise GIS systems to get to the state of the science versions. And a development map project is underway that is essentially an interactive web map that will help track new development in Missoula from initial proposals through end of stage process. And that will have support cross-departmental development review. It's going to help track critical decisions that affect multiple development projects. So that's another exciting product from GIS that we're looking forward to. I think we have a lot of conversation in GIS about the tremendous opportunities that are out there, and sort of prioritizing the work that team will do. There's more exciting possibilities than there is time in the day for that team. But as we work through and prioritize some of their key goals and deliverables for FY22 and looking into FY23, we will probably be back to talk just a little bit about some of their needs. One of the ones I would like to just flag at the moment is the potential need for aerial photography or passive imagery to support that continuing information in the GIS area. So with that, I think the last item I just want to highlight again, the strategic projects analysis and reporting team. My wife asked me if I named it, I picked the acronym because I liked fencing, but Dale picked the acronym, so I don't take any credit for it. But it is, I think it really does capture a need that an organization like Missoula has to be able to support strategic projects where they are at any given moment. And not every department can support an adequate staff to provide that sort of project support. So we hope to build out and really hone in on what are the most versatile and valuable support that we can provide at the moment. We're doing, that's a lot of strategic project administration, the federal building, the Scott Street and White Pines project, the Office 365 rollout and activation. But there will be more. I mentioned earlier that we are looking for ways to support strategic communication efforts at the city, really amplify the work that Jenny does as a communications director to bring in and support engagement through the platforms that we have, Engage Missoula and the website, and figure out how to make those more valuable internally to our colleagues, but externally to the public as well. So there's a lot of exciting opportunities there. And I believe with that, I will stay in charge of the deck here, and I will hand it over to Angela to talk a little bit about the Human Resources Department.
Thanks so much, Eric. And thanks for giving us time today, Council. I believe I've met all of you, but for the record, I'm Angela Simonson, the Chief HR Officer with the city. I am here today to highlight the budget, but also some accomplishments that our team has made in these first 9 months of the fiscal year. I'm very proud of the work that our HR team has done as we have worked to and continue to work to be strategic partners for all of our departments in the city, while also ensuring that we're good risk managers for the entire organization. One of the projects that we take great pride in, that we worked on our own to iron out, is a mission and then vision and value statements. And on this screen before you is our mission. You can spend time reading that, as well as the vision and values for our department on the Human Resources website if you'd like to learn more about that. Next slide, please. Here before you is a snapshot with a pie graph of the HR budget. Our total budget is $1,115,379, and that houses both HR and risk and safety. And so most of that falls to HR, with about $325,000 going to risk and safety. Much like what we saw with central services, we have about 2/3 of our entire budget that is staff costs, so the personnel expenses. And then when we look at the orange slice of the pie there, 22% of purchase services, that primarily houses a number of different contracts with vendors, the citywide employee assistance program, EAP, the expenses associated with that fall there. We have contracts like for our applicant tracking system, CMS of special contracts that have gone through approval to assist us with classification, and then training. And then the capital outlay expense was a one-time request. It will roll over to next year's budget. Will be requested to roll over to next year's budget. And that's for any equipment that's determined, needs that are determined through the emergency planning process that we've been working through. And the reason why we'll see a request to roll most of that over to the next fiscal year is because the process of going through the emergency planning services that we've been working with a vendor on is just taking a little longer. And we need more time to be able to identify specific equipment that will be needed, and then the funds available to purchase those. Next slide, please. The common challenges or ongoing challenges for our department lie first and foremost with lack of modernized payroll and HR technology. That lack of modernization has created limitations for our ability to make decisions using accurate and easily attainable data, and then also impacts overall efficiencies and effectiveness of service that we provide to the cities across, or excuse me, the employees across the city. Much like many, if not all of the departments that you've heard from, staffing continues to be a challenge. We were so excited last year when council approved an additional FTE for our team so that we could have capacity to meet some of the big goals that we have in the service requirements that the departments have. However, 3 out of the 9 months of this fiscal year, that position has been vacant on the front end due to needing to post it. That position is a human resource generalist position, and we had to post it twice. When we first started recruiting for it, we filled it, and unfortunately we lost that individual. She chose to move on, and so now we have gone 2 months with that vacancy again. We now have a plan to create an internal formal training opportunity and trying to be more creative in how we can fill that vacancy. And then I like Eric, like you said, I don't really see this as a challenge, but it's just a continued effort to work to align and improve business operations and helping find some consistencies around policy and practice throughout the city. Next slide, please. I just want to take a moment to highlight some of the achievements that we have made so far in our team in these first 9 months of the fiscal year. We have found a vendor and signed a contract with a vendor for our applicant tracking system, that is NeoGov. And we are more than halfway through our internal training and building out that system for implementation. In fact, tomorrow we get to launch our first training with a pilot group of hiring managers, and we will be offering citywide training for managers and then staff. And our official go live date for the public is June 13th. And we'll be having some communications going out to media and stuff to let the public know about that. And that's a very big project, and we're super excited to be able to launch it. And then we continue to work on our compensation and classification projects. We are working with CMS, our vendor, to assist us in finalizing all classifications for non-union positions. And we continue to do pay equity audits to ensure that we are equitable in how we pay our staff. And we have a number of career ladders that have been developed and implemented, which is allowing staff to progress in their positions and receive compensation as a reward for taking on additional responsibilities and complexity of the work that they do. And the final highlight of accomplishments is around our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, known as JEDI. We have conducted our first round of leadership training. We have hired a new JEDI specialist who is actually an FTE under HR, and Donna over in Parks and Rec assists with work plans for some of that work. And then we went through a recruitment process for our staff committee and allowed staff to express interest in being part of a committee around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have selected those individuals and held our first committee meeting. Looking ahead, you will hear me visiting with you later in this year about the needs for pay plan modernization, implementing and onboarding a formal onboarding plan, and that ties in with our applicant tracking system. We will be having a citywide climate, or otherwise known as engagement survey, for our staff, and that will be launched the last 2 weeks of June. And we will be gathering really helpful data from that survey to help us make decisions across the city. We'll be developing and implementing Supervisor Academy, which will be a series of trainings for our supervisors to help limit risk and ensure effectiveness in supervision. And finally, Eric has talked a little bit about the need for HR and payroll and finance software upgrades. And we will be looking at working towards finding a vendor and moving forward with finding a good HRIS system. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide today. And this is the other half of our HR team, which is our risk management and security and safety. Accomplishments that we've achieved in that area have been securing City Hall at the entry and finishing that build of the guard station, as well as implementing security screening at council chambers. We are working to do emergency services planning, and that takes us to the looking ahead as well, because we'll be implementing business continuity plans and finalizing those emergency action plans. And then that takes us to another exciting adventure that we'll be on next year, and that is the implementation of the Alertis system, which will be a citywide electronic mass notification system that will include reader boards, panic buttons, and other ways to alert staff and elected officials of emergencies that may be impacting our city facilities. And that is all that we have for today. And I'll take any questions, and as will Eric. Thanks for your time.
Great. Are there any questions from any of the counselors? I'm not seeing any raised hand. Wait, here we go. We have one. Sandra.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really detailed presentation. I really appreciate it. I did have some concerns with the lack of staffing, though. Is it because we're just not getting a lot of applicants, or just because the ones that are applying aren't qualified?
It's a combination of both. First and foremost, it really depends on the position, but I would say if we had to look across the board, lack of applicants is the number one issue. And then there have been a few recruitments where we do not have qualified individuals applying. I can speak for myself. We posted an HR generalist position, and I ran it for 2 months, which is longer than I ever am comfortable running an opening for. And it was a struggle to find individuals that even had experience working in HR, let alone met the minimum qualifications that we were looking for. And so it's a combination, and we're trying to be creative and find ways to entice individuals to apply. And we're working with managers to really evaluate those minimum qualifications when it's possible, to maybe look at training assignments or cut back on number of years required if it's not necessary under licensing or something like that. Thanks for the question.
Okay, yeah. At my day job, we were struggling for over a year and a half to find a qualified individual, so I know. And then also, when you're talking about diversity, I'm just hoping that folks that are with their background are qualified, but don't fit the, I guess, either the right ethnicity or the right gender. I hope that we're not hiring those folks because of that, even if they are qualified.
No, in fact, what I can tell you is that would be illegal. The only arena where like filling quotas based on ethnicity or gender is actually in higher education. And so in the employment arena, we cannot take that into consideration. The way recruitment works is when we're working for diversity recruitment, we target and we try to get the word out so that we can create the most diverse applicant pool possible, and then probability increases. We only hire based on merit. So I can reassure you of that.
Okay, that's great to hear. And then my last thing is more of a comment. With the new security at City Hall, I've been getting a lot of citizen complaints that they feel like they're not welcome to go do City Hall business with that. So, I mean, I just wanted to point that out, that I've been getting some complaints about it, even though I understand that it's for safety reasons, but that's the end of my comments and questions. Thank you.
Great. Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angela, thanks for the information. On your last slide, it mentioned that you'd completed or maybe it was 2 slides back, you completed a pay equity audit, and then looking ahead, you've got pay plan modernization. I think I can figure out the difference, but could you maybe expand on what the pay plan modernization would entail or will entail?
Yep, I'm happy to. It's a work in progress. And so the difference between the pay equity audit and then a pay plan modernization is that as we're going through the classification system rehaul, we're identifying areas where pay did not keep up with market, where discrepancies or inequities came into play. I always assume not intentionally, right? But until we do that audit and identify it, we can't make remedies. So as we're identifying such issues, we're remedying them along the way. But once we finish all of our classification, then we'll be able to look at the entire picture of all of the non-unionized staff. We'll be able to develop a more modern pay plan policy for the rules around how staff are hired in as far as their initial wage, and then how they progress with pay going forward. So the equity audit is remedying issues that we see in play right now, and the pay plan modernization is working to revamp rules to ensure that we remain equitable, and that the pay plan policy is clear to everyone, from the most entry-level staff person clear up to the mayor's office and council. Everyone should be able to read the rules around how pay at the city of Missoula works and understand it. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thanks. Can I have another question, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
You mentioned recruiting and maybe having trouble finding applicants. I'm wondering if you, and I know this will be anecdotal, but has HR seen any concerns of applicants from out of area with our housing costs and cost of living? Has that come up?
Yes, we've had a number of top candidates actually who have been offered positions, and then when they've realized that housing availability is difficult, they've withdrawn. But for the most part, I would say the majority of our positions that are difficult to fill don't fall into that category, but we have had some challenges with that.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. You done, Mike?
Yes.
All right. Heidi.
So I might have missed this. It's been a long day. But is there a timeline for the pay equity audit currently? And I guess why I ask is I remember a couple of years ago, we instituted $15 an hour minimum wage, and it seemed like the people that were most affected by that all were in the Parks and Rec department. And it seemed like, like they just weren't paid as much as maybe some other departments are. And so, yeah, I was curious what the timeline is, and if it, I guess, equalizes what some of those entry-level jobs would be paid across departments.
Good question. So Eric and Dale and I continue to meet. We actually had a second meeting last week to identify how we will take our current pay practices into the new pay plan model. And we still have to develop our consultant at CMS has presented a draft copy of a new pay plan model, and we're working to make some revisions to ensure that it fits with how the city of Missoula operates and that it can meet our needs. And ideally, it would be great to have that ready to go by July 1. In reality, I don't think it will, but we're hoping to see a phased approach and that we will see some of that take place, if not all of it, in the next fiscal year. And the pay equity issues, we try to address those as we identify them. So we will have pay exception committees where a manager will bring forward a request to increase someone's wage, and pay equity is one of those reasons. And as the committee reviews that request, we may identify other inequities. And so the result may be, we are happy to increase this wage if you remedy these two things that we just noticed in your department. And so we're trying to catch those as we identify them. The overall revamp of the pay plan policy will catch far more of them as far as classifications and pay, and we'll have a better plan going forward to try to avoid anything like this from happening. And it's, when we look at pay inequities and misclassifications, I do want for the record that up to this point, we've had 40 positions classified under the new classification system, and we had a handful of them that were misclassified. The majority of them are all classified appropriately. And so this isn't a widespread issue, but it's important, and we need to take it seriously. And that helps, keep up staff morale and retention and everything else around that.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions for this segment? All right, well, thanks, Eric and Angela. Lots of great information here. I really appreciate it. Next, I had Lee Griffin and Dale Bickle. So it sounded like you were going to go first, Lee, if you were on the meeting. Oh, there you are.
Yes, indeed. I am going to try to do a pretty quick run through on ARPA. Folks have had questions, and we haven't discussed ARPA very much since the FY22 budget process.
Great.
Close that up a bit. Okay. So what is ARPA? It's the acronym for the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by Congress. This delivers $350 billion to state, local, and tribal governments across the country to help with their response and recovery from COVID-19. And there are multiple tranches for ARPA funding that the city is eligible for, so I wanted to point those out for folks. Right here, this is a slide that we actually used last year during the budget process, and we knew a bit less about ARPA at that time. But we knew that we would be eligible for funding through the state, as well as a metropolitan city. So if having over 50,000 people, Missoula qualifies as a metropolitan city. And that is where we receive a direct allocation from the Treasury. So that direct allocation from the Treasury is $14.1 million. We had an earlier number last budget year of 14.3 when we were looking at the Montana League of Cities and Towns estimate, but we received verification from the Treasury that it is the 14.1. We received half of that funding deposit into the city's bank account in May of 2021, and we're estimating to receive the second half before the end of this fiscal year. Now, there's a tranche that goes to the state, and they have quite a few programs, but what we really qualify for are water and sewer infrastructure funding. So they have a minimum allocation. We received $10 million for water and sewer minimum allocations from the state, and then they have competitive grant rounds, and I believe Public Works talked about this a bit. It's definitely sort of a moving target for them with funding on some of their projects. They received $2.9 million in round one, and they have $5.2 million in applications that are currently in. Now, a third tranche is this home ARPA, and we received $1.3 million. This is coming directly from the federal government through their home and HUD program. Of course, folks want to know how we can use ARPA funding. We can use it for public health expenditures. We can use it to address negative economic impacts, including economic harms to workers, households, small businesses, industries, and the public sector. And that's the city of Missoula. We can use it to replace lost public sector revenue. And by doing that, we use this funding to provide government services. We could use it to pay premium pay for essential workers. And then again, the big infrastructure dollars to invest in water, sewer, and we don't have broadband, to improve access to clean drinking water, vital wastewater, stormwater infrastructure, and to expand broadband internet. But within these overall categories, communities, municipalities have broad flexibility to decide how to best use the funding to meet their respective needs. It's great. Every community is different. But the funds must be fully appropriated. We must have budgeted for how we're going to use all of it by the end of calendar 2024, and we must then fully expend it by the end of calendar 2026. The guidance was not complete when we first learned of ARPA. Subsequently, the Treasury has issued more guidance. And one piece is that we are able to elect sort of, they all called it the standard deduction of $10 million in revenue loss. So this direct allocation is for the provision of government services. That's a pretty wide umbrella. Treasury lets units of local government decide how to best balance the response to the negative economic impacts of the pandemic with utilizing once-in-a-lifetime funding for strategic investments to strengthen operations. So as folks who were on council may remember from last year, we did go through and allocate funding through the FY22 budget process. ARPA funded requests came in as new requests, and we allocated that first $7 million, and this is a graph just showing a general breakout of where those pieces went. We did over $3 million for housing, Operation Shelter, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, in the Poverello VA Center Transitional Housing. $1.1 million for public safety, including mobile support team and critical incident team, and PPE for fire, police, EMS equipment. We have $1 million, sorry about that. $1 million that was requested and budgeted for the health department and their pandemic response. General city operations, $1.1 million for IT. That was very helpful. Human resources had safety and security upgrades. $71,000 for facilities, services, air filtration, frequent cleaning. Various pandemic expenses, a lot of departments purchasing PPE, especially early on, and $81,000 for grants administration. Equity and community, we're spending on Parks and Rec, after-school scholarships, programming at Base Facility, Lowell Community Center, and the JEDI program. And this just shows folks the breakout of that actual budget and how it was allocated during FY22. Another interesting item of note that we didn't necessarily budget for, but we may discuss this in the FY23 budget, are the costs that the city has actually borne related to the health plan. So these are COVID costs for our employees, dependents, and so forth that are on our health plan. So we've seen between July and December of 2021, $692,000 of costs. Earlier, between July and June of 2020, it was $123,000. If we didn't have that COVID spending, our medical per month per member cost would have actually been down 10.4%. This may, of course, be because people deferred some equipment, but we won't know that for a bit. So right now, with those COVID costs, medical plan per member per month increased by 7.4%. The pharmacy plan increased 19.7%. And then there were inpatient costs. These were folks actually checked into the hospital, and we paid $447,000. If we did not, our inpatient per member per month, that's a mouthful, would have been down 31.2%. So we will still, of course, be receiving some of these costs on our health plan as the pandemic hopefully winds up soon. So that other tranche that we discussed earlier is the $1.3 million in home ARPA. This is directly from HUD. And the money that is used has to go to folks that qualify as low and moderate income in Missoula. There's an allocation plan that is required. It is being pulled together by Montana James and her housing staff, and that will be presented to City Council once it is complete. Mentioned earlier that the state of Montana was another tranche, and here are 6 of the programs that they had, and the only one we were able to tap into was for water and sewer. Totaling with that pending grant number $18.1 million. So for FY23, where does that leave us? We have not budgeted or appropriated or encumbered half of what we've received in that direct allocation from the Treasury. So that's $7 million. We will receive it before the end of this fiscal year. We hope that's what we've been estimated so far. It will be part of our budget process. So as folks bring in their budget new requests, funding is required to be identified in those new requests. And again, we need to encumber or allocate these funds by the end of 2024 and spend them by the end of 2026. Do folks have questions?
There we go. I was muted. Thank you. I do see a couple of raised hands. So Sandra.
Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate it because I know I've asked a lot of questions about ARPA, so this really broke it down for me. One concerning thing that I had, though, so you are getting all this money from the federal government, and you have to use all of it, or you don't get to use any of it. Is that how that works?
No. The direct
okay.
allocation is being directly sent to us. So it's not a matter of something that we're applying for. They've just sent it to our bank account. And then we have to
okay. And then so I guess what happens if you don't allocate it by the time that is required, and then if you don't spend it by the deadline, what happens then?
You would likely be required to send it back.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Heidi.
Sorry, my kiddo's walking in and asking me questions. So my question is, I've got 2 questions. My first one's around the health care plan, and you probably can't answer it right now, but I was, I guess I'm wondering if we're also expecting to see a bump in healthcare costs that are a result of deferred medical visits, or just impacts from not having those preventative visits over the last 2 years. And are we, like, is that something we're planning for in our budgeting as far as healthcare goes? Or I don't know what other communities are experiencing. So
I don't either. I think that is something that's actually really difficult to estimate right now, and other communities are in the same position that we are. There's this assumption that folks had deferred certain items, but we have to wait until we actually see those bills to get a good understanding of if that was actually what happened.
And then my second question is on the home ARPA funds. Are those, is this year the only year we get those, or are those also coming? Yes, it's only this year.
Right.
Thank you.
Lee, if you could make sure that the presentation is attached to the referral, that would be great, just because there was lots of great information in there. Dale.
Just to follow on Heidi's question, during the first year of the pandemic, there was, we had a drastic decrease in doctor's visits, and that normalized more over this summer. So right now, I don't think we are anticipating a huge rush of people coming in and to visit their docs, because that rush kind of a little mini rush did happen. So, but we're hopeful that some of these big expenses, our reinsurance program will reimburse us for some of these big COVID costs that you saw, but they'll also raise our premiums because of it. So that's that issue we're going to have.
Thanks, Dale. Sandra.
I don't know if this is a question for you guys, but I noticed that this last insurance period, our max out of pocket was reduced by about $3,000. So I was wondering if that had something to do with the ARPA funds, or if that's like an HR question. mean, I'm happy to see that, but I'm just wondering why.
It was because of the short year. We converted our plan from a fiscal year to a calendar year. And so it was a 6-month period. And so that's why, and so we reduced the deductible and the max out of pocket to conform to that 6 months. And then you'll see it bounce back up, or you have seen it bounce back up on January 1, when we went to, now we are on a calendar year plan.
Okay, thank you. That was a great explanation.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions for Lee? Okay, I think we're good. Dale, did you have more information to provide us with, or were you just backing up Lee?
I have one slide to present later, but Lee's got has a second presentation on general, kind of a wrapping up of the general fund. She'll take lead on that, and I can film those questions, and then I'll close with one slide.
Okay, great. All right, back to you, Lee.
Thank you. So this is just a very short few slides to discuss the general fund analysis that we have and our budget next steps. What we have here, and by the way, these were uploaded this afternoon, so folks go back to the agenda. Hopefully you can find them. Are the FY22 year-end projections for the general fund. Please keep in mind these are projections as of a set point in time. We will be updating these monthly, and as we go through the budget process, we actually recognize revenue received through the middle of September. Just another strange thing about our fiscal year and the way that we receive certain revenues. That has a lot to do with property taxes and when those get billed, and how long we can recognize revenues for the appropriate fiscal year. So just a note for folks that these are projections and they of course will be changing. But right now we do have some positive items of note. While it looks like we're a little low in our revenues, we do look as though we are bringing in considerably less in expenditures. Payroll accounts for a lot of this. Those projections tend to be rather solid. You can see that we have been operating for a couple of years with this anticipated expenditure savings that does in fact help us balance the budget. And with the projections right now, it looks like it's going to be, it might be around $3 million that folks are saving in their expenditures. And we have one-time revenues and expenditures in the base. We just go ahead and project those out utilizing the budget. It may come in a bit differently. We'll know as we get a bit closer, but we are projecting an ending fund balance of over $3 million. It's a few $100,000 less than target. But again, at 10% of the fund balance, those numbers are relatively small and likely to move quite a bit. And I'll just discuss the FY23 budget process so folks have a bit of an understanding. Marty also calls this how to destroy your summer, but it's hopefully not quite that bad. We actually start in April internally. April, May, and June, we have our departments and our internal working groups creating their baseline budgets. Those baseline budgets don't really change much for dollars, but they might change in categories, and crafting their new budget requests. Then in June and July, the mayor and administration review those budget requests. The mayor then presents his 2023 priorities based on the strategic plan. A follow-up at some point in July, and we don't have specific dates in here yet. As we get closer, we will firm up the dates. But then sometime in the beginning of July, it's anticipated the mayor will present his executive budget to City Council. And then we spend quite a few Wednesdays in July and August with Budget and Finance Committee hearing those budget presentations and new requests from the departments. We do not present a granular detail of every single fund and every single budget to the City Council. I will discuss those sort of on a larger scale, but there are many that are sort of set special revenue funds and so forth. But when departments are coming in and stating we want to spend on a large capital project or we want a new person, these are the types of presentations that are usually come in the summer. The City Council has the opportunity to ask questions, to give feedback, to have folks come in the departments come back and present further information. Then a really important date is August 1st. It's not always the first, but it's the first Monday in August when the taxable values are due from the Department of Revenue. Taxable values allow us to understand what our tax levy revenue might look like. So after that happens, a week or two after that happens, we will actually open the budget public hearings for Monday night city council meetings. Those may happen concurrently with the committee meeting presentations still happening at the same time. But we do in fact have to have city council adopt the budget by August 22nd in order to meet all of our statutory obligations, or when we need to send information into the state, when we need to send information into the county, and when we need to set levies for road and park district, street lighting, and so forth. And that was my short presentation.
Great,
Let me know if you have questions.
And just to let you know, Lee, there's a buzzing. I'm not sure if it's your connection or if there's a moth or a bee in your computer. I'm not sure quite what that is, but just FYI. Okay, Dale, did you have more comments? Or are there any questions, first of all, on general fund before we go to Dale? Right, Dale?
I think I'll just point out one, if you're looking at that general fund projection later, and the one unusual thing I think that you see there is that it looks as if we budgeted a huge loss for our budget, that net income of minus 5.8 million. And it's part of that revenue timing that Lee talked about. We recognized $7 million of ARPA funding in FY22, and that's why that looks that way. So we are using those one-time fundings to do that, and so we're maintaining our fund balance targets. We do have, mentioned that structural imbalance before that we are one of our goals is to continue to work on that. Based on this this particular show, it's that ongoing net income and loss. On a budgetary basis, it's 3.2. It's based on our activities this year, it's a $1.7 million budget. But that is that issue that we are constantly talking about and working to address to phase in correcting that.
Got it. Correct. Right. Thank you for that. Sandra, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So what happens if a lot of council, if the budget does not pass? So what happens regarding that?
Well, one, we are statutorily required to pass a budget. So what we have to be able to do is the mayor has to present a budget and council has the opportunity to amend it, but we are legally required to pass a budget, and we're legally required to pass a balanced budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Right, we spend about 3 months on the budget, give or take. So we should be able to pass something by mid to late August. And I'm hoping people are paying attention this summer and leaning in. Are there any other questions from anyone?
So Gwen, can I at the risk of, I know you guys have been here, but I have one more slide.
Okay, yes.
It's not actually, honestly, that important. But what I wanted to talk about, so what our team did is a great, thank you for sitting through all of these interim budget presentations. And I think one of the things that I think the team did a really great job on is really tying a bunch of these all of their outcomes and results back to the strategic plan and what that meant. And we're really beginning to institutionalize it because really, we're pretty new at the strategic plan. The one that was adopted that we're working from in 20 was really the second one that has been really operational. And we've been really working hard to operationalize it. And then you've seen all of these kind of jargony things about organizational excellence and economic health. And so I just want to share one slide to try to put all of that into a little bit of context. So I'll do that. And what this is showing is a little bit of how we're trying to organize ourselves around the strategic plan. And this has been uploaded along with Lee's presentation to look at further. But one of the things that we've done in our strategic plan, it has a lot of these big goals that are cross-departmental. Now, the city historically, we've been really good at, we're really good at putting out a fire, and we're really good at running parks. But we have a lot of goals in our strategic plan that are community-wide and cross-departmental. And in a way to do that, we've really taken that strategic plan and tried to figure out how to operationalize it. And you've heard people, and even Eric mentioned our strategic initiative work teams. Well, this is a chart of how we are establishing these strategic implementation work teams, and they are based around the pillars of our strategic plan. So there is one for organizational excellence, and you can see the mission there. And there's a lot of, and each one of these not only has this mission, but it has vision, it has guiding principles. We've established memberships, and we're building all these teams to be able to tackle these big problems of, behavioral health or climate here. We have a team dedicated to JEDI. And this is the way we're doing it. All of these work based on function with our senior leadership team. The senior leadership team are all the people who USOP present. Today, it's the leaders of all those big departments, and they all chair these committees. And so that goes to the senior leadership team, then that is advisory to the mayor and council. And I won't spend a lot of time looking at this, but what you'll start seeing, I think, is what we're trying to do in a lot of ways is break down the silos of the departments. And we still are doing presentations here on departmental basis. We're doing fire and police, but you're also going to start seeing things that are kind of out of organizational excellence or out of community design and livability. That's not really generally from a department, but it's from a team that's multidisciplinary. And we're trying to weave that kind of team concept into a bunch of the things that we're doing, because we just can't, the original silos in our traditional org chart hierarchies just aren't working in the way that we need to accomplish our goals. And so that was what I was hoping to do, is just put a little bit of that, some of the jargon and the things that you've seen in all throughout these presentations, put that in one spot so you can see what we're doing. And you'll see coming up in the future, you'll actually see presentations and information out of each of these teams as they get established.
Thanks, Dale. This is great. And honestly, we need to get a color photocopy poster made up of this and put it in our council office. It really is nice to look at, and it spells it out. And when I talk to people about our strategic plan, I tell them that I really wasn't familiar with this prior to getting into city government, but I have come to appreciate it so much, because I tell people, I think we're in it for the long game here. And this helps us to make thoughtful, methodical, logic and data-driven decisions from the bottom up instead of reactive from the top down. And it really helps us to pull everything together and move forward instead of just spinning our wheels, which there's so much going on that it's just a great framework, I think. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Any questions from council regarding the strategic plan? And Dale, it's through 2023. So does that mean in 2024, we would sit down with more sessions with council and revise and regroup?
Yeah, that's what the schedule would call for, is a kind of a big overhaul. I mean, it's, all of the objectives in our strategic plan are multiple years. And it's a mix of, really aspirational items versus really just nuts and bolts things. But that would be the intent, is to do an update ahead of the FY24 budget.
Got it. Great. Okay. Anyone questions for Dale or Lee? It has been a long day, but I appreciate everyone showing up. A lot of people started at 8:30 this morning and went straight, so I appreciate it. And we are done with mid-year budget reviews now. We've covered every department, I do believe. So in late June or so, we'll start seeing budget items, give or take. All righty, very good. Well, get ready to work this summer, guys, okay? It's coming. All right, thank you, everyone. And seeing no other questions, we will stand adjourned.